Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our podcast. Today, we're diving into a super practical topic that's really going to help you take your language skills to the next level, improving your listening through podcasts and movies.
That's right, Sophie. A lot of language learners focus on reading and speaking, but listening is just as important, if not more so. Being able to understand native speakers, whether it's in casual conversations, podcasts, or movies, is a huge part of mastering a language.
Exactly, Ryan. And here's the thing, podcasts and movies are amazing because they let you hear the language in its natural context. You're getting authentic conversations, real-world expressions, and a sense of how the language flows in a way that textbooks just can't provide.
Absolutely. And today we're going to cover some strategies and tips for using both podcasts and movies to improve your listening skills. We'll talk about how to choose the right material, how to listen effectively, and how to get the most out of each one. And we'll share some recommendations for podcasts and movies you can use too.
So let's start with podcasts. Podcasts are such a great resource, especially because you can listen to them anywhere, whether you're commuting, working out, or just relaxing at home. The first thing you want to think about when choosing a podcast is the level of difficulty. If you're just starting out, you probably don't want to jump into podcasts that are too advanced. Start with something that's a little easier to follow.
Right. And a good rule of thumb is to pick podcasts that match your current level but still challenge you a little. For example, if you're a beginner, you might want to look for podcasts that are specifically made for language learners. They often slow down the speech, explain vocabulary, and focus on everyday conversations.
Exactly. Podcasts like The English We Speak or ESL Pod are great for beginners and intermediate learners. They focus on practical vocabulary and common phrases, and they often break down complex topics into simple, digestible parts.
And the one thing I love about podcasts for listening practice is that they give you the chance to really focus on the sound of the language without all the visual distractions you get from watching a video or reading a book.
That's such a good point, Ryan. When you're listening to a podcast, you're really training your ear to pick up on different sounds, rhythms, and accents. And if you're using podcasts to improve your listening, it's key to use active listening strategies. So don't just put it on in the background. Pay attention. Try to catch as many words and phrases as possible.
Absolutely. And if you don't understand everything the first time, don't worry. That's normal. Rewind and listen again. Try to figure out what the speaker said, and if you can't, take a note and look it up later. That process of figuring out words you don't know really helps with retention.
Another great thing about podcasts is that you can pause and replay them as much as you need, which isn't something you can do in real-life conversations. You can take your time and really focus on the words, pronunciation, and meaning. And once you've listened to an episode a couple of times, you'll notice that your listening improves and you can catch more the second or third time around.
Exactly. And once you're more confident with your listening, try switching things up and listening to podcasts without any transcripts or subtitles. This helps you focus more on understanding the general idea and the context of what's being said. You'll start to get better at picking up nuances, accents, and even humor.
And for intermediate and advanced learners, you can explore podcasts that dive into specific topics you're interested in. This could be anything from science and history to culture and pop music. When you're interested in the topic, it's easier to stay engaged and motivated, even if the language is a bit challenging.
Exactly. And you can try podcasts like TED Talks Daily, The Daily, or Stuff You Should Know. These kinds of podcasts offer more complex topics and faster-paced conversations. They're a little trickier, but they're great for pushing your listening comprehension.
Another great thing about podcasts is that you can listen to different accents. Depending on the host or the guests, you'll hear different regional accents and styles of speaking. So it's not just about getting used to one voice or way of speaking. You're learning to understand how English can vary from one person to another.
That's so true. And one last thing about podcasts before we move on to movies. Don't forget to listen actively. This means not just hearing the words, but also focusing on intonation, stress, and tone. In real conversations, these things are just as important as the words themselves, because they give you clues about the meaning or emotion behind what's being said.
Great point, Ryan. So now let's switch gears and talk about movies, another fantastic tool for improving your listening skills. Movies are great because they offer a more dynamic learning experience. You get to see the characters, their facial expressions, body language, and the context of the situation, which all adds to your understanding of what's happening.
Exactly. Movies provide context and visual cues that can really help you pick up on things you might not catch just from listening alone. Plus, you get to hear how English is used in different situations, whether it's formal, informal, funny, or dramatic.
One thing I love about movies is that they expose you to natural conversations and real life slang. In podcasts, you get more scripted, structured language, but in movies, you hear people using contractions, slang, and idiomatic expressions. It's a great way to hear how people actually speak in real life, especially if you're aiming to sound more natural.
Absolutely. And similar to podcasts, movies also give you the chance to hear different accents, whether it's American English, British English, or even regional accents. This is super helpful because the more exposure you get to various accents, the easier it becomes to understand them when you're out in the real world.
Exactly. And a good strategy when watching movies to improve listening is to start with subtitles in your own language, especially if you're a beginner or intermediate learner. This way, you can understand the plot and focus on the listening part. But once you feel more comfortable, switch to English subtitles. Or even better, try watching without subtitles to challenge yourself.
And one thing I recommend is to watch movies you've already seen in your native language. Because you already know the plot, you can focus more on the language. You'll be able to catch more of the details, and it'll help you stay engaged because you're already familiar with the story.
That's a great idea, Ryan. It also takes some of the pressure off because you're not struggling to understand the story itself. Another thing to consider is watching movies that reflect everyday life. Comedies, romantic comedies, or even TV shows like Friends or How I Met Your Mother are great because they use a lot of casual language, idioms, and expressions that you'll hear in real conversations.
And speaking of TV shows, they're a great option for learners because you can watch multiple episodes, allowing you to hear the same actors speaking in various contexts. This repetition really helps solidify vocabulary and listening comprehension. Plus, you get to hear how people interact in different settings, whether it's at home, work, or with friends.
And one final tip for movies and shows. Use the pause button wisely. If you don't understand something, pause it and rewind. Try to figure out what the word or phrase means from the context. This is another chance to practice your listening actively.
Absolutely. The key is to keep challenging yourself. Start with easier content, and as you get better, move on to more difficult material. Eventually, your listening will improve, and you'll be able to understand natural conversations without having to rely on subtitles or slow speech.
Right. And don't forget, practice is the key. The more you listen, the better you get. And the beauty of using podcasts and movies is that they're enjoyable. You're not just learning for the sake of learning, you're enjoying content that interests you.
So true. It's all about immersion, making the process feel natural. And before we wrap up, let's just quickly talk about balancing both methods, podcasts and movies. You can use podcasts for focused listening practice when you're in the mood to concentrate, and then use movies when you want a more immersive, relaxed experience.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to stick to just one type of content. Mix it up, experiment with different genres, and challenge yourself. Over time, your listening skills will improve, and you'll be able to enjoy these resources even more.
Well, that's all we have for today. We hope these tips help you on your journey to better listening. Whether you're tuning into a podcast or enjoying a movie, keep practicing, stay curious, and most importantly, have fun with it.
Thanks for listening. Until next time, happy learning.
Take care, everyone.